Hi, my name is Eric Johnson, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what it was like growing up. One of the earliest things that I can recall was my mom coming in kitchen one day and saying, "We're moving to Japan." We had just moved into our new home, and we were still excited about that. We had just got a Nintendo, and we were so excited, about this new home and the new life that we. She walked in and she said, "We're moving to Japan." And I just remember thinking, where's that and why? I had a lot of questions, but we moved to Japan. A few months later, and once in Japan, we moved again. We we moved into an area called Koza initially, which was near the zoo in Okinawa, Japan, which is where we're stationed. Moved to an area called Kadena Circle. Then a short time after that, we moved again, moved over to an area called Morgan Manor. And these were all related to my dad's work, but I do remember there were frequent moves. One of the first things I could remember about actually being overseas in Japan in a quote unquote military family were the constant moves. Constant. It was a bit stressful, as you can imagine, because we had friends and people that we had got to know, and our moves were, taking us away from being around those people, those kids that we had just met and friends that we had. I remember that being one of the things that stuck out first about actually being in Japan, how much we were moving. It was pretty free. My brother and I, we went to Christian schools, private Christian schools, and for the most part, we were the only two African American. There were other kids that were dark skinned, if you will, um, but the majority of them were like Indian. You have people from Tamil and some other places in India that are blacker than most black people. So it wasn't the fact that there weren't any black people in the schools, but there were no other African Americans. So my brother and I were we kind of stuck out. I do remember that we are sticking out. Um, in terms of me being accepted, when I initially got to Japan, one of the things that they asked me all the time. Now you may not be able to envision this now as I sit before you, but they used to always ask me to dance like Michael Jackson, and I never had a problem for early on. They would always come up to me and say, "Eric, dance like Michael Jackson," and I would try to do some Michael Jackson moves. Um, but we wound up moving to another school, and weren't really too interested in Michael Jackson, and that's where we did experience a bit of problems with the kids at the school. My brother, who was smaller than me, younger than me, experienced a lot more issues than I. Um, and that has affected him greatly over the course of his life. Some of the things that were said and done, especially later on, it really affected. Um, in terms of missing out on things from being overseas, is not like what people would think. I remember talking with my family, and most of us missing stuff like commercials on TV. Like I remember watching TV shows, and then a commercial would not be cut out, and they would show the commercial. We would be like, "Whoa, look at that!" Like, because over there we wouldn't see the products or the new um, clothes or anything that you guys see advertised on TV now. we wouldn't see that stuff. We would just see the TV show. We would sit there for the show was so long. We would sit there and watch the show. There would be no commercial. Since then, now FEN, which is a Far East network, um, has made some changes, and those small things have made people feel a little bit more human or connected with the United States. But small things like that. In terms of food, you could go to the stores and get your hands on, anything that you wanted to eat. In terms of um, movies, all that stuff was available. So it wasn't as though we didn't have access um, to things that people have in the States. But it was kind of this disconnect, namely with those commercials, and that was really one of the biggest things. Um, but apart from that, the military did a really good job on helping people to stay connected with the United States and their this idea of being an American and working over. In terms of the benefits of being in the military and the negatives, one of the benefits that has carried over into my adult is the experience of being able to meet so many different people. I mean, so many different people. I had friends mainland Japan, Okinawa. Sometimes they try to distinguish Okinawa, Japan from mainland Japan. We had friends from mainland Japan, Korea, the Philippines, from India, from Bangladesh, Nepal, all over Korea. Um, and it was amazing to talk to these kids. And I used to always try to learn at least how to say hello. That for me, that was my thing, and it has still carried over into me being. Um, if I meet someone and they're speaking in English, then I started to think, man, it's at least a bare minimum that I could learn how to say hello. Uh, and so I learned how to say "como está ka" and "que se obai," just any language. That was something that I really, really enjoyed. Now, in terms of the negatives, there were negatives. Um, Japan is considered a homogeneous society, which means the majority of the people that are there are from there. Homogeneous society, kind of the same. Um, and so there were those that were not open, one, to Americans being in their country. And then that was kind of exacerbated, their hatred was, when they saw us as my dad was kind of high up in the food chain, and so we were in areas that were really nice. We were in schools that were really nice, and there were people that resented that. And I understand that now as an adult, as a child, I just thought, well, why don't they like it? And we caught a lot of pressure. We dealt with a lot of racism from those people. It was a very kind of like a standout thing where we would go to school and everyone would be nice and good morning and ohayo gozaimasu, o genki desu ka? We would say hi, ohayo gozaimasu, ohayo. No, no, just say ohayo. Really nice. I mean, that's how it was. And then someone would come up and out of the blue and say, "You have freedom? Are you free? Do you still want your freedom?" And it would just come out of the blue. So I can honestly say that we did experience racism and discrimination, and the other forms of unfair treatment. But on the whole, it wasn't like that. I mean, we did have teachers that came to teach at our school that were from the United States, and many times they brought those beliefs with. And so we would have Filipino teacher, an Indian teacher, teacher from China, and then we'd have a teacher from Kentucky. And it just seemed we wore uniforms. Like I can remember not figuring out for a long time, we wore uniforms. And whenever there was a field trip or no uniform day, I would do great the entire time. And then, like a day or two before the field trip and no uniform day, I would mysteriously get in trouble about anything. And I would get put on the list where I had to stay in uniform and I couldn't go on the field trips. And I mean, that happened so long. It was just like I expected it. It was like I expected it. And then it was always one particular teacher that was doing it's it was just an experience that I had that I really didn't understand. It took me later on in life to figure it out. I just thought that they didn't like it. So I definitely did experience that. But ironically, the majority of the negative experiences that I had in Japan, being in a military family, weren't from Japanese people. They were from Americans that were in Japan that brought some of those beliefs with them. As an adult now, looking back, one of the things that I it sticks out as a major regret, or something that I just wish it wasn't like that, is I miss my family. I those bonds that you have with your cousins, and you know cousins that kind of become like your brother, your sister. Close relationships that you can have with your aunts and your uncles, being able to talk to them and learning about your family. It's the kind of things that you take for granted in being in the United States and being or having access to your family. But I didn't realize that until I was an adult. And I, would talk to my aunt and she would say, well, you do this and it's just like what your dad used to do. And in speaking to her, I began to learn so much about myself, and I realized um, just some of the stuff that she told me and how it changed my perspective on things and subsequent actions and choices that I made. I thought about, those are some of the experiences that I really miss growing up overseas, having those interactions and those relations with family members. And that's one of the things that I regret, because many of those, now I am in my 40s and they're still having to be built, mended, and fixed to this day. I still have to work to build relationships with my sisters and maintain those relationships with my sisters. Did not go to Japan. They, we grew up almost in a different era. So I think that anyone that's working with military families or military children in particular, you have a bigger repertoire of resources available to you now, because had it been available to me when I was growing up, my parents might have just said, why don't you hop on Skype? Why don't you hop on Zoom, or just send them a message on Facebook? I think the world has changed now, and there are a lot more resources that are available to kids now and to families now that weren't available to me when I was a child. And I think that anyone working with families like this, they're experiencing any of these issues, you have a lot more available to you. And I think being knowledgeable of not only the issues that families may be focusing, maybe dealing with, but being able to help focus them uh, in investigating and exploring all of the options that they have for them to help deal with these issues, um, will also be a really, really good strength. I think now they even have a kids messenger where parent has to get access to the app and then give the child permission, and then the kids can communicate, and they do it with full parental controls. That didn't exist. That didn't exist when I was in Japan. I hope this was enlightening. I hope it was entertaining, and I'm very interested to hear what you thought about the discussion. You guys, take care. Nice.